Let's continue the summary of Gary Keller's The One Thing, great book about focusing. And in the last video, in the last chapters, he taught us the focusing question. What is the one thing that I can do today such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or even unnecessary? But he goes a little further than that, and he teaches how to ask good questions, because that's how we progress in life, in our business, in our relationships. We see the situation and we ask good questions in order to answer them and overcome the problems that are presented to us. So how can you ask good questions? He presents a quadrant with two axes. One axis is the size of the question, big or small. The other axis is if it's a broad question or a specific question. So let's say, for instance, that you in your business, you are in charge of sales and you want to increase the sales of your business. A small and broad question which would be the worst question of all, would be something like, how can I increase sales? Something very simple, and it is so simple that it's the first thing we think. It's the first question we ask because it's so simple. It's so low-hanging fruit, right? How can I increase my sales? But that's not a good question. So the next step would be a small, but instead of broad, specific question. For instance, how can I increase my sales in 5% in the next fiscal year? This is not bad, but we are after extraordinary results. So that is not a good question for what we are aiming at. It is a perfectly reasonable question, but we are not reasonable. We are extraordinary. So we may go to the next step, which is a big question, but a broad one. For instance, how can I sell more than all my competitors? That is a good question, a great question, a big question, but still, it's still a bit specific. So an even broader example would be something like, how can I be the best salesman? Or how can my company sell much more than it's selling now? Or how can I sell in order to be rich? Those are very broad. They're big, which is good, but they're broad. They're not measurable. And so you don't know if you actually achieved them. And this is actually something we do with our lives. Like, I want to be rich. Okay, but what is rich? How many dollars do you have in a bank in order to consider yourself rich? How do you know that you reached your goal? How can you know when to stop? How can you know when to set another goal? If it's too broad, you can never know. And you can even, either you keep going when you shouldn't, or you should change your goals and you don't know when, or you sell yourself short and say, oh, it's not what I imagined, but I said I was going to be rich, and $50,000 is rich enough, so I'm going to stop. So either you don't know whether you achieved it, or you can sell yourself short and pretend you achieved something that you did not, if the goal is not specific, if the question is not specific. So we get to the good questions, which are big and specific. So in this salesman example, it would be something like, how can I double my sales in 6 months? It's a very challenging goal, and you put a time frame. Like, it is measurable, and you have a time frame. Those two are essential for it to be specific. So you know exactly whether you hit the mark or not. You know exactly when you're done, when you're not, when you should set another goal, or when you should, think of another plan to continuing trying to reach this specific goal. So now we know how to ask big and specific questions. And of course, since this is still in the One Thing book, we should turn that question into the focusing question. So what's the one thing that I can do to double my sales in 6 months, such that by doing that, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? That's the focusing question in order for you to achieve the big and specific goal that you set using the big question, the big and specific question. So how can you achieve a good answer for your questions, your focusing question and your big question? Well, We have three tiers of answers. We have the doable answer, which is something that you can imagine yourself or you see what your peers are doing, and you just copy what is available. Just copy what you imagine or what you see around you. You see that it is doable, everything else is doing it, so you can do that. But of course, if it is something that is doable and everyone else is doing it or could do it, then your question isn't big enough, or your results are not going to be big enough for your question. So you have to go to the next step, which is the answer that is a stretch. You can research what the best people in your field have done. You can research what other people are afraid of doing, or they don't have the discipline, or they don't have some factor, but you'll get to an answer that it is a stretch, but it's still not the ultimate tier. You can do the stretch, so you can see that it's a stretch, but it's not the best possible answer. If you see somebody do it, even if it's just one person or one business, or even if it's someone in history that has done it, it is good. If you do it, it is good, don't get me wrong. But if you're after extraordinary results, something that no one ever has done before, you have to go to the next tier, which is what is possible. Something that no one has ever done, no one has ever imagined it, but because you have your focus, you have your motivation, you know that it is possible. That's what you go after to achieve extraordinary results, something that no one ever has achieved. So how can you achieve such a hard answer? Like if no one did it, it is because it's hard. It will take everything you have. So what can you do? Well, you use the focusing question to break it down to smaller goals, and you can also use your creativity, take time to think, to write, and also you have to research. You have to use every resource available. Read biographies, use the internet, go after scientific papers, use everything that you can read and get knowledge. Because this is not specifically from this book. There's another very, very good book called Range, in which there's a lot of research that says that people who have a lot of different skills, instead of focusing on one specific skill their whole lives, people who have a range of skills can achieve more creative results. So that's why you have to use every resource available, read what people in your field have done, but also people in similar fields or even completely different fields. Use the help of people, help of specialists in your field, on other fields. Use every resource you have in order to achieve this great answer, which is in the realm of what is possible. It's not even real yet. Your mission is to make it real. And use what other great people have done as a benchmark, as the lowest possible thing you can do. That becomes your minimum. What other great people have done, what other peers are doing is like below minimum. Don't even consider that. Get the best that has been done so far, and that's your minimum. And then you use everything you have, everything at your disposition that you have at hand or out of your hand to achieve what is possible, what is extraordinary. That's it for questions and answers. Good questions and good answers. I hope this was interesting. See you next time.